Welcome here, Business Blueprint. Today, I have a very special episode for you. We are going to drop some financial knowledge on you. This is so important if you are a hairstylist, just a business owner in general. This is going to have tons of key information that you are going to need to be successful in the hair industry and any other industry specifically. Now, today I have with me, it's become a good friend, actually. I love talking with this guy, hanging out with him. J. Michael Cole. He is a barbershop owner, despite the hairstyle, as well as a financial planner with Northwestern Mutual. And I just have so much fun talking with him. I thought I would bring that conversation to you here today.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we're in the Hair Biz Radio studio, which is cool, which you haven't seen yet.
It's awesome. I like the crab, by the way.
Yeah, the crab's just a little special touch.
Yeah.
So I guess we have two parts here. So you have the barbershop business,
That's right.
which is interesting. And let's talk a little bit about that business. And then let's talk into I feel like, and just even speaking with, say, the team at Bronner Bros, talking about the need for financial knowledge for hairstylists and kind of how you're involved in that part of the industry specifically. So you found carved your niche of financial planning and financial health in the beauty industry, which is very unique.
It is. It is.
So let's start with the barber side. Start a barbershop? What's going on? What sparked that?
So I live in a pretty cool, quaint community, and my business partner and I, who's also, neither of us are licensed barbers, we jokingly called it Mayberry from the Andy Griffin Show, and we just said, you know what, we live in Mayberry, but there's no Floyd's Barbershop. So we joked around about enough. I just said, hey man, are we gonna do this or not? And I got permission from my wife, which was surprisingly easy. I went to Amazon. I bought a book on how to open a barbershop. I wrote a plan, used my connections in the community, found our manager who consulted with us for 18 months through the opening process, which included, as you know, is very hard to do, find the right space at the right price, in the right location. And we spent 18 months going through that, upfitting, hiring barbers, like the whole 9 yards. And then we opened so we've been open for 7 years. So that was summer of 17 that we actually opened our doors. 7 years later, we've got 7 chairs, 7 barbers, and pretty good retention on our team, which was what excites me the most, is knowing that we're serving them really well.
That's perfect. And, we were having a conversation earlier because I was like, we hadn't really talked too much about the barbershop and the business side of it. And what I really like about it relative to, because it is like booth rent style, similar, not exactly, because there are some differences definitely with what you offer, but I really like what you offer because it's more of like a full package. And I think this is unique from what I've seen. Not that I'm in the industry, but I've talked to tons of hairstylists. Right. You offer a lot more support for your stylists, which in turn will make them more successful, or I should say as barbers, make them more successful as barbers, which should in turn make them be able to pay you, as well as be on the right track to make a good living, and continue to keep this going. I mean, you just said you have a high retention rate. So that says to me that you figured something out. Can you explain a little bit as far as some of the extra stuff that you guys do? It's not just, hey, here's the space, good luck.
Yeah, so that's a great point. So, I think our number one competitive advantage that we have is we live in a community that has a relatively high net worth, and our community treasures our team. They value our team. We jokingly say that our barbers are local celebrities. They can't go to Publix or anywhere else without somebody coming up and saying hello to them and talking about how much they love them. And so, I think that community aspect is pretty darn incredible. But what we do is we just really want to make it turnkey for our barbers. We want them to be able to come in with their tools and day one be able to start. We handle marketing for the shop across the board. We will provide swag that they can wear should they choose to, because, they are $10.99, right? And so, but should they choose to wear the swag, they're welcome to. We provide them that. We provide business cards. We provide the product that they can use on the clients that they can then in turn sell and receiving a generous commission on the product sales. And we just really wanted to make it easy for them just to come in, establish a business, establish themselves in the community, and go from there.
Now, what made you go that more almost full service route opposed to just saying, hey, look, I'm just in this as a business. I'm just going to give you the space and say, hey, this is how much you have to pay each week and good luck.
I think it was just stupidity. I say that's ignorance. I didn't know how else to do it because I didn't come from the beauty industry. I didn't have expectations around like the way it's supposed to be done, quote unquote. I just did it the way that like we thought it should be done. And our manager didn't yell at us, right? So he said, okay, well, it sounds good. Let's give it a shot. We got really good advice from him as well. But at the end of the day, probably the thing I got the most pushback on was opening up at 7 a.m. People thought I was crazy to open the shop up at 7 a.m. Like, who would want to work? Who would come in to get a haircut? And I tell you, between 7 and 10 is probably our best business hours. I mean, these successful men that come in to get their haircut, they want to get in, they want to get their haircut, they want to get on to work and get on with the rest of the day. They don't have time to take a lunch break and come get their haircut, right? And, I didn't say that model works well everywhere, but it works really well where we live. And so I think we've just really tailored it to the community that we live in.
And it's interesting because I was going to ask you, what do you think your competitive advantage is with your barbershop? And that could be one of the factors is that opening up at 7 a.m.
Yeah, well, I think that, and we're also the only game in town, and I would say we were very blessed and fortunate in that we got in when we did. We have a pretty good landlord who is willing to work with us, but the startup cost, can be a lot, right? And I think that the other competitive edge to kind of manage that cost is, we're a 900 square foot shop with 7 chairs. And so I think I was sharing with you earlier that my wife has an interior design background, and we sat down with the floor plan and we mapped out how can we put in as many chairs into this shop where you're still reasonably spaced, people aren't on top of each other, but every chair equals revenue. And so how can we maximize the revenue in this 900 square foot space? And that was a big focus for us.
And you mentioned landlord, and that's an interesting subject. Me opening many private label stores, dealing some with landlords or buying the locations ourselves. Or what tips do you have as far as working with landlords? Is there something that's, if you're thinking about opening your own salon, that they should be prepared for? Because a lot of people don't, they've rented an apartment before, but it's a whole different animal doing a commercial lease.
Yes.
Personal guarantees. It's different. Is there any tips that you have for somebody that's going to be their first time dealing with a commercial lease?
Well, I think it's important to first highlight what's the big difference between a commercial lease and a residential lease. In most states, residential law is much more in favor of the tenant, much more tenant-friendly law. You get into some of the squatter rights and things like that. I mean, it is really hard to evict someone from a residential lease, right? And probably rightfully so. You want to protect people who are in their home. I'm not saying those laws are perfect, but they are much more tenant-friendly. On the commercial side, that's not there. The commercial law is written such that it's much more landlord-friendly. So I would say the number one thing you need to do is find an attorney that will review the lease for you and will give you a red line copy to send back to the landlord. And negotiating the terms, it's more than just the price. It's negotiating, like, what's your escape clause look like? Like, if something goes south, like, how do you get out of the lease? And then where we found flexibility as we renegotiated our lease is we offered a longer term to give the landlord more surety that they would have a tenant in there. And in exchange, we renegotiated our lease down. So there's some trades there. But I tell you, man, like, the most important thing is get an attorney. And they're not cheap, but they get really expensive when you actually need them.
Absolutely. So when you first, so what I'm hearing, and I feel probably the same way, is when you are first signing a commercial lease, even though you could sign a longer term and get a lower rate in the beginning, the first time you're signing it, that's maybe not a strategy you want to use because you don't know if this thing's going to work. So after you had your business established for 7 years, now you're back at a table like this and talking about negotiation terms for the lease. You're feeling confident about the business. You're in a good space. Then you can go ahead and do another long-term lease at a lower rate.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, and you turned a thought there. So with our original lease, we had 7 years with 3 one-year renewal options. And so we could have just executed a renewal option, but I evaluated where the economy was. I evaluated, how much value is for them locking us in for another 10 years at this point in time. And so instead of like executing another 1-year lease, which we could have done, we just said, hey, what do y'all think about? Let's just renegotiate this now. And so if you're in the first term lease, I think 5 years, 7 years, probably less than 7 years. When we kind of took on a lot with 7 years. That was big. That was big. And I don't recommend that. I think 3 to 5 years for a first lease makes a lot of sense. But negotiate in like those renewal options, right? And so that gives you the flexibility to, okay, I'm going to do a 1-year renewal, we'll reevaluate, do another 1-year renewal, we'll reevaluate. But if you can renegotiate while you're in those renewal years, I think you've got a lot more flexibility because you're not up against a wire at that point in time to like, oh my gosh, like if I don't renegotiate this now, I have no options. Right. So, I mean, having optionality is super important in this process.
Absolutely. So going to the other side of your life, because you kind of have a couple parts on the business side. He's even wearing the CFP pin today on the suit coat, the Certified Financial Planner. For those that don't even know, how would you define a certified financial planner?
Yeah, so I think it's important to, when we evaluate our life financially, I think it's important to realize there's really 4 swim lanes that our financial life lives in. The first swim lane is everything I would say that we don't do as a certified financial planner, right? And so that's the real estate attorney. That's your banker. That's your loan provider. It's your CPAs, certified public accountants. It's your bookkeepers. All these people who have something to do with your money, but don't exactly do what we do, right? And so we put them in a bin. And they're very important people, and I know that I am serving my clients really well when I'm also talking to their CPA, when I'm also talking to their attorneys. That means we're integrating really well. But I don't do the work they do. I know just enough to be dangerous and just enough to say it's time to call the attorney, right? But the other 3 swim lanes, the first one is, let's just talk about like insurance, risk planning, right? And that risk planning can be really like, what happens if? And I tell everyone there's 3 reasons we stop working: death, disability, or retirement. The latter is preferred, but we have to plan against the other 2. So that risk side, that risk lane, is really looking at, okay, well, what happens if I die before I want to, whatever that looks like, right? Let's just call it dying during our working years. What happens if I'm disabled and I can no longer stand behind the chair? Like, where's my revenue going to come from? How am I going to keep the doors open in the salon if I'm not able to continue working? It's lumped up also in there is long-term care, right? Which I'm just going to share this with the audience here. If you're not talking, because we're in the sandwich generation right now, where we're taking care of our parents, we're taking care of our children, right? And we're just kind of right in the middle. So if you're not having that conversation with your parents about what their expectations and their desires are for long-term care, you're really getting behind the ball there. So that's a whole nother podcast, right? We can save that for another day. And then also annuities wrap up into that. And I know that annuities come with a lot of baggage as they should. But fundamentally, right, think about annuity as the other side of the coin from a life insurance policy. Right, so life insurance policy replaces the income that you would have otherwise earned if you were still alive. An annuity ensures you don't run out of money before you run out of life. right? So it's the other side of that coin. So that all falls into the risk planning side. And really, in retirement, that's one of your biggest risks is what happens if I run out of money, right? And so that's where that risk planning piece falls into there.
You mean the government's just not going to keep giving us money forever to pay for everything and lavish lifestyles? And
I'm going to go with no comment on that one.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
I have strong opinions on that one. I could train wreck this whole conversation. The third swim lane. So we've talked about professional services. We've talked about risk planning. The next one is the one everybody wants to talk about, right? And Instagram wants to talk about it. TikTok wants to talk about it. YouTube wants to talk about it. Is more money, more money, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And man, if I had a dime for every bright idea I've heard off of social media, I would be rich by then, right? So at the end of the day, that third swim lane is really, that's wealth accumulation. It's how do we take a dollar and make that dollar grow? And that's really where we're getting into investing in the market. And then more important than that, and here's a dirty little secret, is that's really the easy part of the job. Like, I know, like, I shouldn't say that to all my CFP brothers and sisters out there. But the wealth accumulation piece, the hardest part is not what do I invest into, it's what vehicle do I put the money into that I'm investing in. How is this, and I like to use pickup trucks as an analogy. We live in the South, right? So everyone's got pickup trucks. And as an example, when I was building a sandbox for my boys, I didn't need a dump truck to fill in 1,000 pounds of sand, like just a small, honestly, we just took my wife's Volvo wagon. We bought 1,000 pounds of sand, which isn't that much, right? But that's all we needed for that job.
20 bags, right?
Yeah, it's 20 bags, right?
Yep.
Exactly right. I was thinking it was a lot more sand than that. I was like, oh, it's not as much as I thought. Sand's kind of heavy. So, when it comes to planning for our wealth accumulation, it's important to know what are the destinations we're driving to, right? And what's the timeline for those destinations? And the difference in our pickup trucks that we're using in wealth accumulation is how they're taxed. What's the implications of pulling the money out before we hit our destination, like penalties, early taxation, things of that nature. And then how big can the pickup truck be, right? Because sometimes with our retirement pickup trucks, the government gives us really favorable tax advantages around those, but it puts limits on how much you can put into the bed of that pickup truck, right? Whereas with one that's not specifically tied to retirement, then you don't have that limitations on size, but you also don't have quite the same tax advantages on it. So it's one thing to accumulate wealth, but which pickup truck are we actually putting the wealth into is almost more important than how you're investing into the market. Am I buying this ETF? Am I buying this mutual fund? Am I buying this stock? That's all great, right? They're fun conversations, but it's not really the most important conversation. And then the fourth one, which I think is the most important one, is what integrates everything together. And that's actually the financial plan. So it's one thing to accumulate wealth. It's one thing to mitigate some risk. But it's another thing. It's the next level when you're integrating all this into a plan. And a plan is properly done when you look at where are we today? What does the balance sheet look like? What does the cash flow look like? What does my current risk planning look like? And to that extent, also, I don't personally do property and casualty, but I will evaluate that, for an umbrella policy as an example, right? So for those who don't know, an umbrella policy is an additional leverage level of protection on top of where we are right now. So for instance, if you're in a car accident, if the claim exceeds the limits, that umbrella policy kicks in, right? Provides another level of protection. Those are some of the things we are looking at, like in that initial part of that financial planning process. Then we want to look at, well, where do we want to go? Like, well, I want to retire in 5 years. Okay, that sounds great.
Sounds great.
Perfect. Love it. Okay. How much do you have saved? Well, the math would say that you now need to save $100,000 a year for the next 5 years so that you can achieve that goal. Is that still the same goal? Is that still a possible goal, right? So looking at where we are, looking at where we want to go, and what are the paths that get us there. And then the real fun starts happening, I think, in the distribution planning, which I alluded to earlier, right? So we've accumulated our wealth. We've done a good job through our working years. Now we want to enjoy retirement. And people can enjoy their retirement a lot better if they have certainty around their plan, and they have certainty around how they're going to take money from their account, right? And one of the biggest things we're looking at there is, one, when you're taking withdrawals from your account, how is it going to be taxed? How will it be taxed later on in life? Because you're really getting into things like required minimum distributions at that point in time, where the government's going to come in and say, Mikey, you've done a good job saving all this money, my friend. It's time to start taking it out and pay your taxes.
Yeah.
Right? And so understanding what that's going to look like at that point in time. And then ultimately it gets into legacy planning, and understand when you transfer assets from your personal balance sheet to your beneficiary's balance sheet, how does that happen? How is that taxed? And also, what does that probate process look like, right? Are you going to go through probate? Are you going to have a trust? And when I mention trust here, this isn't like a you're filthy rich and you're trying to hide stuff kind of trust. This is just fundamental, like blocking and tackling kind of stuff. But understanding, like, what is all that going to look like as we transition from this earth to wherever? And what does it look like when our beneficiaries receive this? And how would that impact them from a tax perspective? And do you want to pay the taxes so that it's better for them? Or do you want to enjoy it the most and then they deal with the taxes later on? So these are all personal decisions. There's no really one right answer. So, I mean, that's really what we're doing. Like, everything else is kind of easy. The magic happens in the planning.
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
It's a lot, guys. But this is just such important stuff. Now, if you're just starting from scratch, like today's day one, what are some of the most important things that, maybe someone's not ready for a financial planner, okay?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
They need to start getting their life together to be even ready. I mean, it's always a good time to have a financial planner, but they need to start getting their finances, their personal life, their spending and stuff under control. What are some quick tips like that you think people could go ahead and do today before meeting a certified financial planner?
Yeah, wonderful question. I call this adulting, right? And I don't mean to sound derogatory when I say that, but these are just the building block things that people need to do as an adult, and put these things on the list. And many people just don't even know that they need to do these things, right? And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to share the good news. First and foremost is an emergency fund, right? I mean, it's really that simple. Have an emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of your essential living expenses set aside. Not in the stock market, not in Bitcoin, not some other place, but just like in a good old fashioned, boring.
How about high yield savings?
High yield savings, as long as you understand what it takes to get the money out.
Okay.
Right. So, but as long as for the emergency fund, I call it cell phone money. I can log onto my banking app and I can move money in a matter of seconds from my savings account to my checking account to meet any financial need that I have.
Gotcha.
Right. So I would start with the emergency fund. Number 2, health insurance. If you don't have health insurance, you've got to go get health insurance. I tell everyone it's one of these things, like, I'm licensed to sell health insurance. I won't do it because I don't live in that space. It's kind of complicated, I think. And if you're not in it every day, you really need somebody to advise you who lives in that space. And so I know there's the open market. For many fortunate people, that perhaps they or their spouse are in a place where they are offered health insurance as a benefit, but you've got to have health insurance. There's nothing that will put somebody in a bad financial position than having health care costs that they're not in a position to take care of. The next thing over is disability insurance. I alluded to this earlier. There's 2 types of disability insurance. There's short-term and long-term. Short-term is typically something that's offered by an employer, right? You can get individual short-term disability insurance. It's typically pretty expensive. But if you can get it through an employer, it's very important to have. And that's going to protect you if you can't work from 0 to 90 days, right? So I hurt my back at work. I can't go to work. I'm going to receive typically 60% of my income that I would have otherwise earned. That's going to help carry me through until I can get back into work, all right? But what's really important is a long-term disability, and that's typically defined as 91 days and potentially through retirement, like if it's a permanent disability. And a short-term disability, it's inconvenient, it's not great, but it's recoverable. Long-term disability, if it's a permanent disability, you're now reliant on the government and Social Security to provide for you should you can no longer work. And that Social Security disability process, I mean, that can take years to work through there. And frequently you need an attorney to get you through the process of being able to get that claim through the government. And so that can be mitigated with a long-term disability policy. Very affordable, and they can be tailored to fit within the budget, but it's there to protect you in the event that you can't work. And especially in this industry, if you're new to this industry, if you're still young, I know you feel invincible, but the single most important thing you can do, emergency fund, all these things are super important, right? But is to go get a long-term disability policy. While you're insurable, while it's inexpensive, like it is so important to do. Because you, at any point in time, your hand can become an issue, your back can become an issue. You could have a broken leg and then you're stuck cutting hair, like with one leg propped up on a stroller, right? I mean, is this really what you want to do, right? It's so important. That's a bit of a soapbox for me. I'm sorry to spend so long on that, but it's important. Next thing over is life insurance. That becomes important if somebody is relying on you for your income, right? So if you have children, if you're married, if you have debt that would pass on to somebody else, that life insurance is there to mitigate the risk. There's all sorts of life insurance out there. What I'm talking about here is just your good old-fashioned inexpensive term insurance, right? Just mitigate the risk, be mindful of the budget. And then the last thing I would bring up here, well, there's two more things because I could keep going for a while on this, is manage your cash flow. Like get really, really intimate. Like pretend like your cash flow is your favorite Netflix TV show, right? Get super intimate with your cash flow because that's the point where you'll begin to understand, oh, wow, I'm spending $100 a month on Starbucks. I'm spending $300 a month on Uber Eats. That will begin to tell the story of your priorities. And if the way you're spending is not in alignment with your priorities, you'll now know that. So if saving money for retirement is your priority, those are dollars you can reposition to go towards that other goal, right? And then the last thing is that I'll leave here, probably a bit more of a longer answer than you're looking for, but you got me on a roll. And that's a will. And the audience may say, well, I'm single, I just started, I don't really need this. And what I will tell you is that we're in Atlanta right now. If you don't have a will, the great state of Georgia has one for you, right? And if you don't want the great state of Georgia, if you live here, to make that decision for you, then you need to have one that lays out what your intentions are. But more important than just the will are the three supporting documents that go with it, okay? And those are the medical power of attorney, medical directive, and a general power of attorney. If you're in a medical situation where you can no longer make decisions for yourself, that medical power of attorney gives someone that you trust the ability to make those decisions on your behalf. That medical directive is there to, it's kind of like a do not resuscitate, right? It's there to state your intent. I jokingly tell people it's the keep me on ice until there's a solution, or pull the plug because I don't want to be a vegetable, right? It's gross extremes, but that's kind of the idea. And then the general power of attorney allows someone to handle the rest of your personal business in the event that you're not in a place to do that, such as pulling money from that savings account to the checking account so they can continue to pay your electric bill, pay your rent on your behalf, do some things like that while you're unable to. So the will is important, but those other three documents are very, very important, and they're there to protect you. And the good news is these are all just standard forms. You're not going to pay an attorney to go make these things up for you. They're literally fill in the blank kind of stuff. And so for some of this, it may make sense to look at a trustandwill.com or a legalzoom.com if it's pretty basic stuff and it can be done very affordably. Or if you're going to go the attorney route, which there's nothing wrong with that, just ask ahead of time. Like, this isn't by the hour kind of planning. This is fixed fee kind of planning. Like, hey, how much would it cost if? And if they say, well, it's by hour charge, I'm like, okay, I'll call the next attorney. Thank you. Right? This is not complicated stuff. This is pretty basic.
A lot of this stuff is peace of mind as well.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I can tell you, I lost my mom right before COVID happened, and she didn't have anything set up. She had the basic, beneficiary and stuff like that goes only so far. And when I tell you, luckily my sister handled all this because I was very busy with the business, and she handled everything, and it was extra complicated during those times. But it was a disaster, and she didn't have much.
Yeah.
One of the best,
inexpensive, probably.
Inexpensive. And I feel like and I went through that with her and the whole thing, and I was like, this is a mess. One of the things I did was my sister referred me to their attorney, that this is all they do. It's their focus. And I went through that, and just my life is much more complicated. Multiple businesses through multiple states, international property, is very complicated. And I can't tell you the peace of mind, the money it costs to get this done was well worth it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And then, if you have children, the will becomes that much more important, right? Because it's going to state who's going to provide for the kids, right? And where the resources is going to come from. And so, and these are hard questions to think about, like, well, whose feelings are going to be hurt if they don't get the kids and things like that. I mean, these are big things. And so,
it might be whose feelings will get hurt.
Like,
depends on where they are in their life,
So, yeah, I mean, so what my wife Elizabeth and I, what we talked about for our boys was that we would have one person that would do the care and feeding of the kids, right? And then we'd have somebody else there control the purse strings, right? Be the trustee of the trust that holds the assets for the benefit of the kids, right? And that way, there's kind of like a separation of church and state, right? No, there's not going to be any confusion around like, oh, they're using that money, not for the benefit of the kids. I mean, and that was just a personal decision we made. And there may be somebody you trust holistically to handle all of that. And there's no right or wrong answer here. But these are important conversations to have, and they're important conversations to have with the people that you're going to surprise with when you pass, that they're responsible for a couple boys, right? And those are, just full disclosure for Elizabeth and I, those were hard conversations, right?
For sure.
It took a while for us to find common ground is not quite right, but to find peace around the decision on that. And we're at a place now, we've got to go redo it again. Life's changed since we last done it.
Yeah.
And so that's on our to-do list.
Now let's go way back to the beginning of something you said when you talked about emergency fund. And you said for an emergency fund, it's important to have 3 to 6 months of savings, right? How do you know what 3 to 6 months of savings is? How would somebody, just the basic steps, someone doesn't have the knowledge of this stuff, what is a good way for them to really figure out, okay, they said, I saw this guy on TikTok and he said 3 months savings, but I don't know how much that is. What is a good way for somebody to figure that out?
Yeah, that's so I would go back to what I mentioned earlier, is getting intimate with your cash flow.
Right.
And so if you haven't done this, it's one thing to write a budget for yourself, be like, oh, I'll only spend this much on gas, and I'll only spend this much on eating out, and I'll only spend this much at the grocery store, right? It's another thing to do the hard work of taking the last 3 months of your credit card statements and your banking statements and doing an honest evaluation of how you're actually spending your money. That will give you a realistic budget and something that you can build off of and work from. And really what you're looking at for that emergency fund is, okay, if I trim the fat, get rid of my Netflix subscription, stop getting Uber Eats, live on rice and beans, like whatever, right? But really trim the fat down on that. That's your emergency fund. What do I need to maintain my lifestyle, right? And then so you can't really do that in an honest way without understanding how you're spending your money. And so it starts with analyzing your cash flow, and then from that average monthly burn rate, looking that over, if it's $3,000 a month, then you probably want $9,000 to $10,000 set aside an emergency fund. And depending on your situation, you may want to move that out to 6 months, right? If it's just you, maybe 3 months is fine. if you're responsible for a family, maybe it's more like 6 months.
Gotcha. So is that, how would you, we're talking for personal finances,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Now, I know you work with businesses as well.
That's right.
So what are your thoughts? Does a business need an emergency fund? What is that?
Yeah.
What does that business emergency fund look like?
Yeah, well, I think it's very similar. I think it's 3 months to 6 months of rent, utilities, those, that's really where you're looking at the subscriptions. Like, well, in order for me to maintain my point of sale, it costs me X dollars, right? But the same thing, though, analyzing that cash flow. Now we're going from your personal budget to a profit and loss statement. Mm-hmm. If you're running a business, you don't know what a P&L is. You need to go figure out what a P&L is. As a business owner, the most important thing I did was hire a bookkeeper. Boy, that game changer for me. Like, I thought I was pretty smart before, and I realized that I wasn't really that smart. But having that P&L done for me, first thing it allowed me to do is come out of the weeds and take a strategic look at the business, right? Just having that statement that you get once a month, you can look back 12 months, you can look over multiple years, you can do year-to-year comparisons. But that ability to take a step back and look at your business is phenomenally important. But that will also tell you what your emergency fund needs to be. Like, so for the barbershop, we typically stick right around about 3 months of essential living expenses, the rent, the utilities, things of that nature. If you have payroll, it's a little bit of a different thing. So, my team is all W-2, is all 1099. So it's that part of it's not as important for our calculations. But it's phenomenally important because otherwise you're putting things on credit card, when things go sideways. I'll tell you a story. COVID kicked off. My whole revenue is built around having barbers at chairs paying a booth rent, simply put, right? And it wouldn't really be fair of me to expect them to continue to pay a booth rent if we're shut down for a mass pandemic. There could be an argument that it's still their responsibility, right? But as a business owner, I didn't feel like that was fair. But that decision was really easy for me to make because we had the resources set aside to keep paying the rent, right? And then there's a whole thing with negotiating with your landlord, take that out of it. And
that can often be tough too, because if it's a small landlord, they probably have a mortgage on this property as well. Right. It's not like, that a lot of people talked about it during that period. I'm thinking, as a property owner, I'm thinking, well, it's easy to say, well, the landlord just cannot charge rent. Well, the landlord also probably has a mortgage on their property that they need to have revenue to pay for as well. So it becomes a very complicated situation.
It does, yeah. It rolls all the way down. It rolls all the way up, right? So my barber's paying a chair rent. I use that to pay a landlord. A landlord uses that to pay the mortgage to the bank, right? And then we get it all into how banking handles money. That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, everyone owes somebody, right? And so my business partner and I had a conversation about it, and fortunately the doors were only shut for about 45, 50 days. Not even quite that long. It was probably about 30 days. We were pretty fortunate where we were. And then we had some good protocols to kind of get people back in and working. But it gave us the flexibility to take care of our team. And so kind of going back to the importance of retention for me, I think that went a long ways for my team, was the ability that during that time when the world was on fire, we had the ability to take care of them, right? And I didn't pay them, right? I wasn't able to pay them, but they didn't have to pay me to maintain their chair, right? And I didn't even have to go talk to them about it, right? It's just this is just the right thing to do. And so because we had the money set aside, we're just able to do the right thing. But the other piece of that, and I know this is an important topic for you, which is debt management. We were fortunately in a very good position where outside of our lease, we didn't really have debt on the business, right? So that really gave us a lot of flexibility to do the right thing. But those decisions get a lot harder when you owe a lot of people money,
right?
And that applies to our personal finances as well. we're racking up credit card debt. And boy, I didn't even talk about debt management earlier. That's we can have a whole conversation around good debt versus bad debt. But as we get ourselves in more credit card debt, we're putting ourselves at more risk for when those really bad things happen in life. We're already leaning into risk with this credit card debt and with this other kind of debt, and if bad things happen, we're teetering on the edge as it is.
Right.
Right. And so I've always been very debt sensitive. I think it's something I learned from my family, which I'm grateful for. But those are the challenges.
Yeah, I think there comes a time, and I went through this in my life where some people call it like a come to Jesus, where I'm like, okay, something's not working out here. Something needs to change in my life. I need to make some changes here because I feel like it's not just I can look at the numbers and know I'm not getting ahead of anything. Yeah. And at some point, I feel like you have to take a couple steps back in life. That means maybe not going out as much, not having as much fun, being really cautious with eating out, which is better for your health anyway, for the most part, depending on what you eat at home. And I think sometimes when people just feel stuck, if you treat stuff like your life depended on it, then you can get through some of these tough times. I do that within the business where it's like something could be really tough that I know needs to get done. People are like, how are you going to get this done? Or how did you do that? And I'm like, I just treated it like my life depended on it. And I think that's something that you have to, at some point in your life, like if you feel like the credit card debt and this other stuff is just you're not getting out of it, because your goal at that point is just get to ground zero. I just went through this with one of my good friends. Like I said, man, you need to get to ground zero. He ended up getting a little bit of extra money. And I said, hey, how much of an emergency fund do you have? And he's like, what's an emergency fund?
Yeah.
He's 43, 44, and he's never had an emergency fund. And that's me. I've had it at different points in my life, but would always come and go. And he was just like, oh, I need to invest this. I need to trade this money to make money. I was like, whoa, pump the brakes. First of all, you are not a trader, right? Like you're not a trader. Just let it sit in the account and do nothing.
That's right.
And just feel it sitting there. And I'm telling you, it's worth more than the actual value, what you could maybe make on it, everything. Just having that money in the bank that's just not doing anything and it's just there. Now, you've worked with a lot of hairstylists, barbers, and what do you think some of the initial mistakes, either personally or financially or business-wise, that they're making, like it's a redundant mistake? Because if someone's listening to this or watching this and they might be going through the same thing, that might be able to resonate with this and be able to get an answer that this is common and this is how to get through it.
Yeah, I think that I think there's a couple. I think right as people are coming out of school, like there's a big push to get into salon suites right now. And I think salon suites are a great model. But I think as you're coming right out of school, getting into the business, I think you need to be around people. And I think you need to learn the good and the bad from the people that you're around inside of a salon or a barbershop. Maybe even try a few different ones so that you can learn your skill sets, learn from other people how to communicate best with clients, how to handle when something doesn't go quite right. But just being around people so that you can learn. Because, yeah, when you come out of school, you may understand the fundamentals of a technique, but there's also so much more to being a business owner than just like, how do I cut hair? It's how do I run a business, right? And so that doesn't mean it has to be like a W-2 job. I mean, I will tell you that some of my barbers came through the sports clubs or other places like that, and they learned incredible skills from there. I would recruit from those organizations in a heartbeat because they do a good job of teaching people like how to be efficient with their time, how to treat clients, how to greet people, how to have conversation with them. All of these soft skills are just super important. So number one is you're coming out of school, like go join a team, go be part of a team, learn to be a team player. That's number one. And number two is as you step out into being a business owner, whether it's, the solopreneur in the salon suite or opening a shop where you're going to bring other people in, number one is save some money. Save some money. It's kind of like when people go to buy a house, the only thing they think about is like, I need money for the down payment. Then they're surprised by closing cost. Then they're surprised by the cost of like, this house has no window treatments.
This house, I have to move my stuff from my old house to from this apartment to the house I just bought.
Exactly. It's everything that you don't expect, and there's always going to be something that you don't expect.
Every time.
Always. There's something that's going to happen that you don't expect that's going to happen. So if you're entering into that without any room to flex for the unknown, you're already putting yourself behind the power curve, right? You're already doing that. And so you've got to have that money set aside because, all right, so now you've got your own salon suite. You've got your own barbershop. You've got your own salon. You're going to have like a monthly mortgage payment or a monthly lease that's due. And you've got to, your revenue those first few months may not be where you want it to be. And then there's going to be marketing costs. Like, how do I tell everybody that I am now here, right? And so you've got to have money set aside for that. Otherwise, you're going to be running up debt. And I think the other thing is to understand the impact of compounding interest. And this is probably going to be an Einstein quote that gets attributed to him, but he probably never actually said, but we're going to give him credit for it anyways, which is there are two types of people in this world, those who understand compounding interest and those who pay it. All right. And so I don't know if he said it or not, but I'm going to roll with it, right? Y'all can all just tell people that J. Michael Cole told you this.
There you go.
And so here's the idea, right? So when I bought my first condo, this is something my mom taught me. She taught me how to read the amortization tables. And so when the first condo I bought, like I thought I had a pretty good interest rate. It was like 6.5%, right?
It probably was good at the time. Historically, it's not bad.
Historically, it's great. Right?
Yeah.
Anything right around 6 historically is a great interest rate.
Right.
But I learned, like, through reading that amortization table, I learned that paying principal on that mortgage in the early years was the most impactful time to do it. And I would actually sit there and say, like, okay, well, if I could put this much more down, this one payment in the first year or two of this thing will knock off this many years later on, because I understood the amortization table. So I was learning about compounding interest, and I learned to save myself interest down the road. Then on the other side of it is think about like saving towards retirement. If you understand how compounding interest works, you understand that the most important dollar you save is the dollar you save today. Even if it's not as much as you'll save later on in life, it is still the single most important dollar that you can save. And boy, I don't have these numbers in my head, but I went through an exercise with a group of stylists recently where we talked about saving $100 a week, right? And I'm going to, nobody hold me to this. I'm going to kind of just give you some ballpark numbers from the top of my head. I don't have my financial calculator next to me. I love my financial calculator, by the way. I'm a nerd. But $100 a week, saving that for 10 years comes up to be about $350,000. Okay. Like that feels
pretty good.
Feels pretty good, right? I feel like I'm getting somewhere in life. No, I'm sorry. That's not right. 10 years was about 100,000, 120, excuse me. 20 years came up to be about 350,000.
Okay.
But if you get to 30 years, now you're starting to touch $1 million. $100 a week. $100 a week. We probably, if you're in this industry, you probably have $100 a week in cash through tips that's flowing into your purse and right into Starbucks or right into Uber Eats or right into some nonsense that you don't really need, right? And so, boy, I wish I had those numbers with me because they're so impactful, but it's that ability to understand how compounding interest works, and that ability to break it into small bite-sized chunks. Like, you know what, $100 a week, I can do this, right? I mean, I'm going to take my first days of tips. I'm going to work on Monday. My tips for Monday is going to go towards retirement. My Monday tips go to retirement. If you just did your Monday tips to retirement, you're probably going to be in pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably be in pretty good shape, right? And then there's all sorts of online resources where you can sit down and you can do the actual calculations. Nobody hold any of these numbers at this point, but it's there for illustrative purposes. But it's so important, right? And then the other thing I would say to that is, you're saving for retirement, like just take the very simple, boring answer. Go set up your account with Vanguard. Go do that Vanguard target date retirement, because unless you're going to be there managing that and you think you know something, you're going to be too busy running a business. Like, just hit the easy button. Hit the easy button, and you're going to get to where you need to be.
Yeah, for sure. You know, they say the first 100,000 is like the most important. And I know if you might be at zero right now and 100,000 seems unattainable, but because of compounding interest, it does get easier. Because after you get to the first 100,000, getting the second is actually much easier.
So much easier.
And then getting the third just gets easier.
It does.
And then everything just gets easier. But if you don't have that initial base, it's just very difficult to continue moving forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and I tell everyone, people ask me, it's like, well, you know, man, I'm in my 40s and I haven't started saving yet. What should I do? I was like, well, you should start saving. Start saving, right? You're right. You're starting later, right? The best day to start saving was yesterday. The second best day is today, right? And get going. I mean, it's never too late, and it's not going to get better with time.
Is there an easier way? Because a lot of stylists still, they're getting a lot of cash, Cash App, Zelle payments, and it's hard for them to like really understand how much money is actually coming in. So if they don't know what's really coming in, they're probably not paying attention to what's going out. Is there any sort of advice you can give for those people that just have this money coming in all different ways and it's not necessarily easy for them to manage?
I would limit the forms of payment types that I receive. I mean, I know that like we want to make it easy for our clients, but I think you're hurting yourself in the long run for exactly what you just described. When we're taking payments over Zelle, we're taking payments over Cash App, we're taking payments on credit card, we're getting cash in, and that just becomes an administrative burden to manage that. And the next thing you know, like you're spending money because it's in your pocket, but you don't really have a plan for what to do with it. So in my very humble opinion of the person who's not standing there collecting payments, cutting hair, trying to feed the family, I get it. But I would say, I'm sorry, but this is how I get paid. You can pay me cash or credit card, right? It's one of the two, right? Or debit card. Your clients will adjust because they're there for you. They're coming because they like you and they love you. They like how you make them feel. They want to be supportive of you, and they'll adjust. There may be some moaning at first, and if they don't come back to see you because of that, they're probably not the client that you wanted to have for the rest of your life anyways. And so respect yourself, respect your standards, and people will adjust for that.
You know, one of the things that I did, I know I've told you through conversations, is I have all my expenses broke down. Expenses, the general expenses, not us. We just had lunch, sushi lunch. That's not in the expense sheet, right? And I have everything broken down. This is something you can do at home. You can go to Google Sheets. It's completely free. And I break it down into categories. So I have the mortgages I pay. I have health, meaning like my gym fees, my anything related to health. You know, I have my subscriptions. Health insurance. I have my streaming, so it could be like HBO, Netflix, maybe a couple other things, not too many. You can only watch so much TV. And then just kind of, I would go through my statements and just kind of, and then to kind of look over and I get that number together.
Yeah.
And that's something that I didn't do till much later in life. And I knew I should have always done it. I don't know why I didn't. I've been good lately for a while now, but I don't know why I didn't. But when I tell you, once again, it comes down to peace of mind. The peace of mind of doing some of these things. I know it sounds kind of like, well, I don't need to do that, or I'm not saving any extra money, so it doesn't matter because I don't have money to invest. Until you can get some of this stuff figured out, the peace of mind that it offers is very valuable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because you can't say that you don't have money to save if you haven't analyzed your cash flow.
Just that simple.
It really is that simple. And I think that we live in a world of instant gratification, right? Where I don't want to wait to cook my food because I can just get Uber Eats and I don't have to put as much work into it. I can scroll through my phone until I find the thing that makes me laugh and I get a dopamine hit. All these little things we have built a society around instant gratification, and then also we've built a society around unreasonable expectations around what our lives should look like, because we've got all these people making these videos on their private planes, their fancy cars, doing whatever, and good for them, right? I mean, good for you. If that's the whole truth.
Could be a
farce.
It could be a rented car. It could be, in LA,
thing.
they have those planes you can go into. It's not even a plane. It's just like a studio setup. I was thinking of making one here in Atlanta. Atlanta's perfect for this, where it looks like you're getting in you're sitting in the private plane. I mean, technically you can probably do it with AI pretty easy now anyways.
That's right.
But, you're sitting in this private plane and, I'm flying private. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think we've got to get comfortable with delayed gratification. Right. And I think that's important on a couple of levels. I think one, as an individual, we have to be comfortable with delayed gratification and knowing that we're all a work in progress, right? Whether it's our physical fitness goals, whether it's our spiritual goals, whether it's our financial goals, we need to realize that that it's more about the journey than it is about the destination. Right?
I try to teach a lot of people that. I try to teach them a lot, because it's not, a lot of this is not easy.
It's so hard.
On this channel, so I'm recording, I've told you how I'm recording, I'm starting Hair Brand from scratch. And it's just so interesting going through this. And once you learn certain techniques, like I didn't pay myself for the first 2.5 years at Private Label because I had 3 staff before me. I was technically 4th employee. I got my first $1.
That's a lot of pressure when you're responsible for other people's families.
It definitely is.
Yes.
And that's why it took 2.5 years. But if I wanted to do it today, I could definitely do it in I'm so much better of an entrepreneur at this point, even with the market being a little different. I can do it much faster because you learn. But I'm still enjoying just like the setup portion. We just got our first sale, but obviously we're still in the red, going to be for a while. And I still even tell people, like, they're freaking out. They haven't made money and they're not paying themselves in like the first month of their business. And I'm like, it's just not that easy. And see, for me, starting this and going through all this for many years, almost 20 years as an entrepreneur, I'm not freaking out, but I know people that freak out, and I say, look, I know this is tough for you right now, but you're going to look back in a couple of years and be like, why was I freaking out about something that you really didn't even have control over?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. We've got to be comfortable with delayed gratification, right? Boy, I feel like we could just rest on that for a minute.
Well, it's interesting because, I spend about a month a year in China, and like I'll be in Beijing, and I'm like to one of my manufacturing partners, we're really close. I'm like, brother, this is such a big city. I'm looking around. I was like, I haven't seen one homeless person. And he's like, well, why would they be homeless? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm in the U.S. It's all over. It's like this horrible thing that happens to people. They just, and he's like, well, if it's a mental issue, the government takes care of them. But everybody else in China, for the most part, even though they are going through some serious financial issues right now, he's like, they save money. Like they just won't spend the money.
Culture.
It's part of the culture.
Yeah.
Like even people that are, when I'm in the countryside where people make like pennies on the dollar compared to us, they still have more saved than a lot of people in America.
Yeah.
Even though they make like literally no money. It's crazy. And they still have money saved.
Yeah, well, it's some of my favorite people to work with are not the people that's making the most money. It's the people who save the most. I mean, there are plenty of people that I know that make a whole heck of a lot of money, but got nothing meaningful to show for it. But then you've got, good old-fashioned blue-collar people who make decent money, right? But they've lived well within their means. They've cared more about retirement and being prepared for that than having the nicest car, the nicest clothes, the nicest house, right? They live pretty modestly, and you wouldn't know that they've got saved what they've got saved, right?
Right.
And those are the people who make it work. To be successful in life, you don't have to make a ridiculous amount of money. And I know inflation, it's really painful right now for a lot of people. So it just goes back to, it's even more important right now that we're paying attention to our cash flow, because pre-COVID, that $20 for Uber Eats is probably more like $35.
Absolutely.
Right now, right? And so those habits, those pre-COVID habits that we had, it's probably time to reevaluate those and think about what is truly the most important thing. And I think that for some people, it's helpful to have like a vision board, right? To have something like up that you can look at and remind yourself like why you're making the sacrifices that you're making. I mean, I was phenomenally blessed in that my parents just kind of built those habits into me, so they kind of come naturally. If they don't come naturally to you, you've got to need some motivation to help you make these lifestyle choices. And then also, like, I think one of the things, especially if you're dealing with credit card debt, I think it's really important that, just Google like snowball or avalanche method of how to pay down your debt. And one of the things I like about that is if you have a lot of high interest debt, tracking it on a monthly basis and seeing your progress. Maybe you haven't won the battle yet, but seeing that you're gaining ground, tracking that, okay, I was at 15,000 last month, I'm at 14,500. All right, I'm winning, right? And that means that's that much less money you're paying interest on. So that means the next month you can make an even better gain, and the next month you can make an even better gain. And if you want to build good savings habits, that ability to visualize, my emergency fund grew by $500 this month, right? If I had a tire, go out and I needed to replace it, I now know that I've got the cash. I got the cash to do that, right? That feels really good. It's really good peace of mind. So again, treat your debt, treat your cash flow like it's a Netflix show you care a lot about, and just pay a lot of attention to it.
Yeah, I think, this topic of discussion is so important to me because I've made every mistake that someone could possibly make financially. I feel like going through the years and looking back and reflecting at it. And I really wish, I had someone in my family, unfortunately I didn't, that would have sat me down and really give me a little bit more financial knowledge. I had a little bit, but I really didn't stick with it consistently. And I wish there were more platforms like this where, you have someone that is like yourself that has all this knowledge and sharing this knowledge for free even. And if someone's watching this and they take just a small percentage of some of these tips and implement them into their life at an earlier age or just today, the difference it will make in their life financially. So they won't have to go through all the pain and suffering. There's always going to be pain and suffering in life, but they don't have to go through all the pain and suffering of making the wrong mistakes, when honestly, sometimes it's like you have a dial and you're like on 5, and sometimes it's just like clicking to 6. It's just not even something big, right, but these little steps. And then you're like, oh, wow, I clicked number 6 and that wasn't too hard. Let me click to number 7. And it's like another small little change. Oh, that wasn't hard. And life seems to be getting better. I'm feeling a lot less stressed out about everything. And I can sleep at night now, and I don't have the anxiety behind it's the first of the month and my rent payment's due. And I just think it's so important for us to really listen to this and implement this in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, I mean, so what you're describing here is the marathon approach to financial planning, right? And I think you probably know I like to run. That's kind of my quiet space. And I can typically wake up and run a 5K. Like, that's great, right? But if I were going to train for a marathon, I would not wake up tomorrow morning and then go run 26 miles. Absolutely not.
I have a couple of my marathon medals, 26.2. That is months of training.
Yes. And so, you have to approach achieving your financial goals with the marathon mentality. So what I would challenge everyone here today is write down one actionable item, right? And it can even be the easiest item here. Like, I'm going to go get these basic estate planning documents in order. Very achievable, easy action. Then come back and re-listen to this and say, all right, so I'm going to go pick up another tip. Okay, all right, I'm going to work on my emergency fund. Excellent, right? Like, this can feel overwhelming until it's broken down into actionable steps. So just think about, like, what's the one thing you can take away from the conversation today and say, I can do that. I can make my life that much better if I do this one thing here today, or start this today.
Absolutely. It's definitely a journey, one that you said enjoy the journey, and it's true, but you don't really know it while you're going through it. Right? Because everyone's trying to rush through this and try to get to the next step and the next level. People often are trying to skip different steps up this long staircase of life, which you can't skip steps. Sorry, you just can't do it. And I think, it's just important for all of us to continue to educate ourselves in every aspect of life, business, the personal side, because your personal side does go right into your business side. James Bronner was on our Hair Biz Radio podcast, and there's a really good segment about him talking about, about having your personal life together and how important that is for your business life to be together. It's a great segment. I'll put a link in the show notes to that podcast episode. It was one of my favorite out of almost 100 episodes. Of course, besides having you guys on there.
Me.
but like, it was just that one portion especially was really good. But I really appreciate you taking the time. We're going to have your information. So, if somebody is looking for a certified financial planner and looking to get their life in order financially, we're going to have your information in there to be able to reach out to you. And, what I love is that you really specialize and you've really worked with the beauty industry and professionals. So you have a lot of experience and knowledge about the beauty professionals, because it is very common what they go through as far as financial mistakes, financial planning, and just you understand the business. It makes it a lot easier to help plan for someone if you understand their business and you have the business yourself.
Yes.
I mean, it's a perfect combination.
It makes a ton of sense, right?
Yeah.
And I guess, if I can leave one parting thought.
Absolutely.
Here, so this is an industry that's largely dominated by women, right? And that's part of why it's glorious. But there are some unique financial challenges that women face more frequently than we as men face. And so I think it's even more important for women to take ownership of this and be proactive about starting this planning process, because, and I'll just give one instance here, is that when there's a family member that requires care, let's be real, it's probably not you or I that's going to stop working to go care for the sick child, the sick parent, the dying parent, the aunt who doesn't have any other family members, right? It's probably going to be a woman that goes and does that. And so women are already operating behind the power curve of their financial planning. So it's that much more important, that much more impactful that women are very proactive about this, just because there are more challenges that inherently they just face towards having their financial goals met.
Absolutely. Guys, I know this was a longer episode, but there is so much valuable information in here. This is definitely something you could watch multiple times. It's going to be valuable for years to come. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it in the comments below, and we'll be back in touch and with more great videos soon.